Hey everyone, I'm Mind, and a couple of days ago I made a video where I compared the new LEGO Marvel Superheroes mechs to the Ninjago Evo mechs, because the new Marvel mechs for this year are done in a similar style to the Ninjago Evo mechs, so I wanted to compare them to see which is better, which is worse, and how similar are they actually. If you haven't seen that video yet, I'll put a card in the top right corner, but this video is meant to be a sort of part 2 to that video, because not only did Marvel make similar style mechs to Ninjago this year, but both Ninjago and Marvel created a mech bike set. Here I have Kai's Mech Rider on the left, and the Ghost Rider mech and bike on the right. These were both released in January 2023, and I can't say if the Ninjago team copied the Marvel team, if the Marvel team copied the Ninjago team, or if they both came up with this idea independently. But yeah, these are both very similar sets in that they're giant bikes for mechs to ride on, so I thought it'd be worth comparing these two to see which does the concept better. We'll also take a look at the mechs themselves real quick. However, because I already went over the other mechs in broader detail in another video, I won't spend super long on them here. But yeah, I just want to take a look at these two sets just like as a whole, and see like which one is the better set overall. Now I do think it's important to mention the value in these sets is a little bit different. The Ghost Rider mech and bike is 264 pieces and retails for $35 in the US. However, it only comes with one minifigure, though that minifigure is exclusive. While Kai's Mech Rider contains 312 pieces and retails for $45 in the US. However, it contains a total of 4 minifigures, but none of those minifigures are exclusive. So with that being said, let's start by taking a look at the bikes themselves. Removing Kai, he just clips into the seat right here. You can see there's just like a couple clips for the mech to be attached, and there's bars at the bottom of the mech to actually connect to them. And the Ghost Rider bike does something similar, though actually the opposite way around, with the bar being on the bike and the clip being on the mech. So starting with the Ninjago Kai bike, this thing is really funky in terms of its shape. It honestly doesn't even look much like a bike when the mech's not on it. It's got these two gigantic wheels both at the front and the back, and just these long Technic beams that connect them to the bike. However, the body of the bike doesn't go over top of the wheels like you'd expect. Rather, it's just sort of scrunched up in the center. And I went over this in more detail in my full review, but I'm just not the biggest fan of that look. I think it looks alright when the mech's on there, but yeah, in its base form, it looks a little bit wacky. There's also this like fire out the back to propel it. There's little places to place the mech's feet, which I actually do appreciate, and golden blades at the front to be used as weapons, which I do think look really cool. There's also a variety of stickers throughout to match with Kai's color scheme, including one with a symbol up here, and the handlebars are sort of static in place, and there's a stickered console piece in the center. Comparing that to the Ghost Rider bike, this thing is significantly smaller, however it's a much more realistic bike design. It's got a sort of big wheel at the front, obviously not as big as the wheels on Kai's bike, but of course big compared to the rest of the vehicle. And then the bike sort of has this angled design to get you up to the front. Here this is actually a printed part, which is very nice to see, and it sort of makes like a brick built skull face, which I really like. The handlebars on this one are posable, so that gives you more ways to display the mech on the bike than the Kai bike has. Really love the design of the seat here too. The CCBS armor piece I think works pretty well. And then just like the Kai bike, there is a place for the mech to rest its feet, one of those on each side. I also like the very mechanical design the bike has, despite being only 2 studs wide and using mostly just different shades of gray and black. It has some nice texture to it that definitely makes it feel very mechanical, makes it quite accurate to real life bikes. I'm actually a pretty big fan of how that's done. Then of course right here is where the mech clips on. It actually incorporates very naturally, doesn't feel overbearing, and then the bike actually extends back over the back wheel, which as I mentioned is something I really wish the Kai bike did. The sort of like piping design that comes on the back is super cool too, and I love all the flames coming out the very end. These giant flame pieces look amazing and definitely fit Ghost Rider really well. I really wish they did something similar for Kai, because of course he is the fire ninja, and while there's a little bit of fire exhaust, it would have been cooler to have like the big flames like this bike has. The orange wheel's a nice touch too. It's a nice way to add a bit of color, and you can see that's actually on one side of the front of the bike too. So I think just in terms of bikes alone, I much prefer the Ghost Rider bike to the Kai bike. Just feels like a more realistic design and a more well thought out design. Like this looks great even without the mech on it, while Kai's bike feels very awkward. But of course that's not everything in these two sets. Now let's take a look at the mechs themselves, as well as how the mechs actually connect to the bike, the posability options that they have while on the bike, because all that does factor into which one of these sets I prefer. So here I have the Kai mech on the left and the Ghost Rider mech on the right. The feet on the Kai mech I definitely much prefer. The Ghost Rider mech uses similar feet to the Rocket Raccoon one that I took a look at in my previous video, and in my opinion they're just way too thin, makes the mech very awkward. Then in terms of the actual like leg design, again I'm gonna have to hand this to Kai. Ghost Rider definitely has a more unique design, however I feel like it looks really ugly, especially like this gray open stud right here from the ball joint connector being shown. I don't know, that just looks really ugly to me. The feet feel like very front heavy. I wish that was more evenly distributed. While the Kai mech only uses like a few Evo parts, but they do fit really well here. And while this Kai mech is definitely my least favorite of all the Ninjago Evo mechs, I still think I prefer these legs to the Ghost Rider mech. Then in terms of articulation, with Ghost Rider, he is very limited just like the other Marvel mechs. I will say he is more posable than Thanos or Hulk was, but not as posable as Rocket Raccoon. With moving the legs up, it kind of gets restricted right here. Again, you could flip it out for a little more movement, but that's about as far forward as you could go. And backwards, it could go significantly further than Hulk or Thanos, but still get stopped at the end right there. So as such, it's just not as posable as some other mechs, but as far as Marvel mechs go, it's definitely not the worst. However, comparing that to Kai's mech, you have a full range of articulation on these legs, just like all the other Evo mechs. So yeah, the Kai mech definitely wins in that department. Then coming to the torso and cockpit, they unfortunately did not give Kai any printed tile right here, which definitely would have made the mech cooler. And then opening it up, removing the minifigure. Fairly basic design for the inside of the cockpit, but I don't think it looks bad. Now coming to Ghost Rider, unfortunately he does not have an exclusive printed part on his chest like the other Marvel mechs do. However, there was that printed part on his bike instead. But if you saw my last video, you know what this is like when you open it up. You just flip this down, and it's just this little gray chamber that Ghost Rider sits in. Definitely not the most unique in terms of design, exactly the same as all the other Marvel mechs. It's a fine part, but I definitely do not find it as interesting as the cockpits to the Ninjago mechs. However, I do really like this chain that they have at the front that connects all the way to the back. Definitely helps add like Ghost Rider's overall vibe, and it can be like detached and used as a weapon if you want. Coming to the back of the Kai mech, he actually has like a little jetpack right here, which I think is actually very fun. The other Ninjago Evo mechs don't have the most interesting backs, but this is actually very cool. I like this a lot. And there's also two clips here that hold swords, so you can remove them and use them as weapons. And there's also some bars at the top to attach the Evo banners if you wanted to. Moving to Kai's arm, he's got like this giant black armor at the top. That's very cool, and I love the stickered part. But then he's got a very basic hand at the very end. He uses these new finger pieces that were actually introduced for the Marvel mechs, but they work pretty well to actually grip this sword. However, the hand's done very similarly to a Marvel mech, where it's not its own separate ball joint, it's just connected to the arm, so that does limit posability a little bit. Luckily, the arm itself has a pretty big range of posability, so there's quite a few different ways you could pose the mech with the sword. But yeah, some of the other Ninjago mechs definitely do it better. Comparing that to the Ghost Rider mech, he just sort of has this spike design on the top of his shoulder, which I actually quite like. This might be my favorite armor design of any of the Marvel mechs. Especially this wheel cover piece, I think that's really creative parts usage. It keeps the range of motion on the arms pretty dynamic. It's not really restricted up and down that much, though if you have it out like this, it's a little restricted forward and back. That's not a huge deal though. It can still be posed in lots of ways. It just does not have as much motion as the Kai mech has. Then the base of the hand, there was actually 4 fingers this time around, or I guess 3 fingers and a thumb, so that does make the hands more interesting than the hands in the Kai mech. However, unlike the Kai mech, this mech does not have a place to hold anything, when of course you saw the Kai mech has a place to attach a sword. So between these two, I'm not entirely sure which one I prefer, because I feel like this is one of the better Marvel mechs, and this is one of the worst Ninjago mechs. However, I still think I slightly prefer Kai's Evo mech, just because I much prefer the design of the feet and the legs. It feels more bulky, more like an actual mech, while Ghost Rider has that same issue where he just basically feels like a bigger version of his body, and Kai also has more posability options than Ghost Rider has. And also, due to his limited posability, I also find attaching Ghost Rider onto his bike to be a little bit annoying. You of course clip him in and then move his feet into the correct positions. However, getting the handlebars into his hands are not the most intuitive. I don't know, you can never get it angled entirely correct. So he's always got sort of this awkward grab on them. Definitely not terrible, I mean it works and looks fine, but yeah, you can see the handlebars just sort of slide out of place. So at least personally, I wish there was a way for those to mesh a little bit better. Compare that to Kai, I feel like the design of the bike makes everything combine a lot smoother. Just clip him on very easily, move his feet into the correct positions, and then you can super easily wrap his fingers around the handlebars. Of course I have one hand holding the sword, but you could choose whether or not you want it like that. So I feel like the Kai mech definitely does incorporate onto the bike a bit better than the Ghost Rider mech incorporates onto the Ghost Rider bike. However, the Ghost Rider mech and bike definitely look better when on display. And then just for fun, here is the Kai mech on the Ghost Rider bike. His mech definitely feels a bit big, however it actually fits on there pretty well, and he is able to actually hold the handlebars pretty decently. So I actually don't think this is a bad option for display if you want to get both of these sets. And as you'd expect, the Ghost Rider mech is very small for the Kai bike, so this definitely looks very awkward. So yeah, I would not recommend this, but the other way around does actually look pretty good. But now that I've showed you everything, overall, which of these two sets do I prefer? This is definitely a tough one because I feel like there's benefits and negatives to both, but I think the Ghost Rider bike is the slightly better, like, mech bike set. Because the Ghost Rider bike is definitely 100% the better one, and even though I like the Kai mech slightly more, and I think the Kai mech incorporates onto his own bike a little bit better, the Ghost Rider bike is just a better bike, and as such I think is the better mech bike set. However, that's just the one I think does the concept better. If you were to only buy one of these sets, which one would I recommend? I think I would actually still go with Kai's mech bike, because both these sets have the same issue that they are terribly overpriced. The Ghost Rider set is $35, but in terms of just size and everything should really be like $20 or $25, while the Kai set is $45, but probably should be $35. So they're both very overpriced sets, and honestly I don't really recommend either of them. Unless you have a ton of money, you probably don't need them, there's better options out there. But if you really want this concept, I would say Kai's mech bike is less overpriced, because while the price per part's slightly worse on that one, it does have a lot more bigger pieces is used than the Ghost Rider bike does. Additionally, the Kai bike does come with 4 total minifigures, while the Ghost Rider bike only comes with the 1. So I think the value on the Ghost Rider bike is pretty bad. I also think the Ghost Rider bike is a better display piece, but Kai's mech bike is definitely a better toy. With Kai, it's much easier to get the mech on and off the bike, and there's just like 10 more posability options for the mech. So yeah, I'd say in terms of overall set, Kai's Mech Rider is better, but I think in terms of actually being a mech bike, the Ghost Rider mech and bike is the better set. Of course, that's just my opinion. You could use what you saw in this video to decide for yourself. If you want to see my full review of Kai's mech bike, showing it in more detail as well as all the minifigures, I'll put a card to that in the top right corner, and I'll also put a card in the top right corner to my previous review comparing the Marvel mechs to the Ninjago mechs, just taking a look at the similarities and differences between the two styles, and which one in my opinion is better. But as for this video, I think it's about all I have to say, so thank you for watching everybody. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did and could give the video a like, I would greatly appreciate it, as well as subscribe to the channel if you're new. But I appreciate you all being here, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!